welcome to this video where we're looking at the second Grand Seiko ever made. Now, a little bit of history here. The first Grand Seiko was, as some of you may know, was the 3180 model that was built in, I think, 1961, and it was really the crown movement, but that's too much history. And after the crown movement, which became the Grand Seiko in 61, came the 57 GS model, which is the watch that I have here. This has come into the rotation, so it's a great time to do a video on this model. So the 57 GS model, which is really the 5722 model, the movement, is significant because this is in some ways the first real Grand Seiko, in the sense that it's using a movement that's designed for a Grand Seiko. It's using a case that's only for the Grand Seiko. It has a case back that's, Grand Seiko special. So this one's a 5722-9010. It is from 1966, produced in August of 66, and they only made 1928 of the 27 when this particular model was made. It is the 1960s, or mid 60s, so you still have waterproof on the case back, and you have the solid gold medallion. That is the Grand Seiko Lion. This would later become the GS, the logo from 67, but these models had the Seiko Lion on it, which would come in lieu of not having the word chronometer on the dial. The earlier version of these used to have chronometer, but then the Grand Seiko, the Lion Medallion, became the catch-all for all the elements that Grand Seiko would have, and the chronometer specification was one of them. This is about 37mm. This is the gold cap model, that's why it says GC out here. I need to rotate this. I was going to show you guys the movement, so that's why I had loosened it up a bit. So you can see the gold cap, that's GC. If it were stainless steel, it would say SS. Now this gold cap model, this was made in 3 model variations, case variations rather. So there was the stainless steel, which is the most common. Then the rarer one is the gold cap. This is pretty thick gold plating. This is not your average gold plating. Oh, I didn't realize I had it. And then there was the 18 karat gold model, which is very, very rare. It's really impossible to get. These all had a signed crown, and any Seiko model of these days would have had a signed crown with the W on it. Let's see if you can get. And remember, this is a hand-bound model. This is not an automatic. The 57 GS was also known as the self-dater because this came with a quick set date mechanism, so you could change the date very easily. I really should not be changing the date at this time on the watch, but hey, it's okay. And the case design was really very reminiscent of the Omega designs that they used to have in these days. Now remember, this is preceding the 44 GS, by which there were no more curved lines. Everything was a straight line with more simplistic finish. But this case design really was very similar to what an Omega Constellation would have had, and in fact you can see there are the 5 keep losing this. There's still the 5 stars, just like a Constellation. They're really in some ways trying to go head to head with a Constellation, even though this example was a far better watch than anything the Omega had in its lineup in those days. My particular watch is a very rare watch because this is in really good shape. It's very rare to get these dials in such great shape because remember, it's been more than 50 years. In fact, in 2014, the early 2000 series of Grand Seikos were reminiscent of the design of this watch. If I place them side by side, you can see the same lugs that we have here, that same rounded case, and again ending in those lugs. So the earlier, a lot of Grand Seikos in the 2000s were really a homage to the 57 GS case design. Just as the modern a lot of the contemporary Grand Seikos are a direct homage to the 44 GS. This was the watch that really got to set up Grand Seiko from 1964 to pretty much 1975 when they stopped making Grand Seikos till it got resurrected again in the 1980s. Now, the significant thing about the 57 GS is it's the first time you see the Grand Seiko logo and the Grand Seiko sign and the type of the special feature of the movement where like it would later would show up at the 6 o'clock mark. Now these are double signed, there's Seiko and then there's Grand Seiko, just as it would continue till 2011. So, and that case branding typology just continues. So in fact in this 2006 spring drive of mine, you can see the same Seiko hasn't changed. There's again that applied Grand Seiko logo. Then there's the Grand Seiko name, and then there's the specialty of the movements. If there were a high beat, it would say high beat. If this were automatic, it would say automatic. And this was Diashock, which was in the mid 60s. Seiko was really pushing very hard to get to let people know that their watches were shock resistant and would keep time in a variety of environmental conditions. My particular watch is on a very nice alligator band. So really it's one of those genuine alligator bands. And now let's have a look at the movement that I did want to show everybody. Bear with me because it's very hard to do this on camera. And while I do it, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please be sure to hit the subscribe button because it always helps to have subscribers. This is really hard to do. It's going to be extremely hard to do. I wish I had real tools to do this, but there you go. That's the beauty of that 5722 movement, 35 jewels. This is just exquisite for a movement. I never really open my watches because, most watches they're pretty standard as they are. But this Grand Seiko is just exceptional as a movement. It's really one of the best hand-wound movements that there is. Anyway, so let's close this off. One last look, if anybody wants to enjoy what a Grand Seiko movement from the 1960s, mid-60s would look like. While I do this, some quick facts about the movement. It is, as I said, 37mm case size, about 44 lug to lug. It doesn't have that much lug to lug. Let's close this. And yeah, as I was saying, that this was the watch that was the first one to have the self-date mechanism. That's why it was called the self-dater, because first one to have a date complication. It starts out as the 43999 designation with the 430 movement, but very quickly switches to the 5722, which this one has a matte pearl silver sunburst dial and Dauphine hands and baton markers, all gold. In the stainless steel, obviously it would have been stainless steel. The date frame is again gold plated because this is the gold cap watch. In the stainless steel one, it would be stainless steel. Now, the older ones used to have a star at the 6 o'clock mark, but this one has the stars at the back of the case on the medallion. And the medallion is, as I said, is the symbol of the Seiko chronometer grade. It did not need to say chronometer on the dial because the Lion Medallion is the symbol of the chronometer grade. And remember, that medallion would show up on every single Grand Seiko later on, right? So there's the lion, and that's the first appearance of that lion. And I really like these gold medals at the back, because that medallion is just so beautiful to look at. And this, especially these older watches without the, wow, when they had, it's very easy to wear off the inscription at the back of the dial of the case back. So this one's exceptional because this is in really good shape. Had a 17.5 millimeter band, very frustrating size to work with. 18 won't fit, 17 is too small, but that's what these watches were in those days. And really, this is one of the most beautiful watches that Grand Seiko ever made. And I'm very lucky to have a watch where the dial is just in an exceptionally beautiful condition. It's so rare to find these sunburst pearl dials in such a beautiful condition. So hope you enjoyed the video. Please be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on a later video.